Greetings. I'm D. Harlan Wilson, and I will be reading an excerpt from Strangelove Country, Science Fiction, Filmosophy, and the Kubrickian Consciousness, finalist for the 2025 Big Other Book Award for Best Nonfiction. Here's the book. Strangelove Country is a work of speculative scholarship that examines Kubrick's futurist cinema through the lens of a theory called filmosophy, a term coined by Daniel Frampton in a 2006 monograph of the same name. Thanks to my wonderful publisher, Stalking Press, and of course, gratitude to Big Other for the recognition. On a side note, I'd like to dedicate this short reading to my namesake and uncle, David Laura, who recently passed away. I love you, Uncle Dave. Bit of context. The chapters of Strangelove Country are devoted to Kubrick's futurist films, namely Dr. Strangelove, 2001, A Space Odyssey, and A Clockwork Orange. There's also a chapter on AI, artificial intelligence, which Kubrick developed for years before passing the baton to Steven Spielberg. Throughout the book, I explore how the so-called Kubrickian film mind, or KFM, organizes and reconfigures desire through various systems of control, violence, technology, and futurity. For Dr. Strangelove, the governing framework is pathologizing desire. For 2001, it's weaponizing desire. For A Clockwork Orange, it's neutralizing desire. And for AI, it's customizing desire. So I'm going to dive into the middle of the book and read the first 2 or so pages of the chapter on A Clockwork Orange, where I briefly contextualize the films under scrutiny in relation to the genre of science fiction, which I just refer to as SF. If nothing else, this reading will provide a very brief snapshot of what the writing looks like and what I'm up to. And for ease of presentation, I'm just going to read from my screen. So this is the third chapter, titled Neutralizing Desire on A Clockwork Orange, and it begins with a little subheading called In the Beginning Was the Ultraviolent Word. Kubrick's futurist trilogy was an accident. After 2001, he had planned to make Napoleon a sweeping epic about one of history's most infamous little men. I can imagine how this project might have immigrated into Strangelove Country, but it didn't pan out. Kubrick found himself back in the fold of SF, just not in the same vein. Even when he returned to genres that he had visited in the past, he never tapped the same vein. Dr. Strangelove, 2001, A Clockwork Orange, and AI fall into different SF subgenres, respectively the subgenres of apocalypse, space opera, pre-cyberpunk urban dystopia, and post-cyberpunk post-apocalyptic eco-dystopia. AI is a lot of things. 2001 and AI belong to the broader category of hard SF. It's easy to forget that Dr. Strangelove and A Clockwork Orange belong to the genre too. The cognitively estranging qualities of both soft SF films have less to do with some extrapolated future than with basic SF themes. Dr. Strangelove isn't futuristic at all. Technically, it's an alternate reality story. And the near future of A Clockwork Orange looks more like a 1960s costume party than a genuinely evolved world. We could say that the Kubrickian film mind wears SF like a fancy hat, and A Clockwork Orange, regardless of the SF motifs and poses that this adaptation of Anthony Burgess's high literary masterpiece applies, prods, and portends. A Clockwork Orange is an insane movie, insane in content, context, and conception. Given the intricacy of Burgess's prose alone, I would argue that the decision to adapt the novel is among the most pathological acts ever committed by a famous professional director. The dissolution of the production code in 1968 permitted filmmakers to let their freak flags fly with heretofore unseen gusto. Kubrick still pushed the envelope, though, and few films rivaled his milestone of cinematic violence, which incited real violence, prompting Kubrick to remove it from distribution in Great Britain after a series of copycat crimes and death threats. Released 3 years after A Clockwork Orange in 1974, Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia achieves comparatively outlandish heights, but Peckinpah's film mind lacks the lucidity and logic of Kubrickian psychosis. The power of A Clockwork Orange's affect is virtually unparalleled for a mainstream film. Apart from sacrilege like The Devils, The Exorcist, and The Last Temptation of Christ, not many films approach that affect in the 20th century. Oliver Stone's Natural Born Killers is gleefully transgressive. This deranged, over-the-top satire of mediatized late capitalist life provoked controversy in 1995. Presidential hopeful Bob Dole called it a nightmare of depravity. But society and culture had over 20 years to acclimatize to the no-holds-barred cinema initiated by the post-code ultra-violent cinema of Kubrick and Peckinpah. Viewers had gotten used to broken rules, which had become normative and thus less effective. Still, even today, A Clockwork Orange's pop brutalism seems abnormally rebellious. And yet it's hard for me to empathize with critics of the film, then and now, who fail to appreciate the aesthetics of its deviance. Burgess's novel is surreal, experimental, burlesque, darkly comedic, and written in NADSAT, a made-up language that combines Cockney slang, Russian-based neologisms, gypsy bolo, and an Armageddon of wordplay. And Stanley Kubrick, director, Alexander Walker writes, quote, becoming easily intelligible through context and repetition, NADSAT has the same purpose as the hyper-sophisticated whirls and loops of Humbert's erotic syntax in Lolita. It establishes a precise tonal connection between the hero and the audience, unquote. More significantly, NADSAT, an ultra-violent, technologized language, mirrors the violence of its narrator's desires and culture. To my mind, the novel outperforms high modernist touchstones like James Joyce's Ulysses and Gertrude Stein's The Making of Americans, albeit on a smaller scale. In SF, there are few rivals. Russell Hoban's Ridley Walker and Ian M. Banks's Fearsome Injun are two of them, but these superb novels haven't been made into movies. Kubrick's adaptation put Burgess's novel in a permanent spotlight. In Screening Space, Vivian Sobchak explains that NADSAT, quote, is more than a futuristic tongue, a sign of linguistic change, a gimmick. It is a song and an attitude, a celebration of sound itself, and a new way of looking at, describing, and thinking about what our own eyes perceive in everyday contemporary English. We deal with NADSAT not only as an alien language, but also as an expression of a foreign mind. Therein the wonder lies, unquote. Now, how Kubrick thought he could make a film out of a novel that so deeply relies on the exclusivity of its prose bemuses me to no end. Film is a different mode of storytelling than literature, of course, and while Kubrick preserves NADSAT, but tones down many of the novel's Soviet inflections, replacing them with a more westernized environment saturated by commodified sex, violence, and the collapse of private behavior into public spectacle, he had to translate a verbal medium into a visual one, supplanting the violence of Burgess's word, with a capital W, with that of the Kubrickian image, with a capital I. Okay, I'll leave it there. To recap, in the beginning was the ultraviolet word, and then came the ultraviolet image, and now here we are, somewhere between Burgess, Kubrick, and the psychiatric ward. Thanks for listening.